Hello. Welcome to tonight's panel on social impact in tech. Thank you so much to PARISOMA for hosting. Let's get up to PARISOMA. So a quick introduction of SF Tech for Good. We are a volunteer-run community of about 4,500 people, started 11 years ago. And we're part of the TechSoup Net Squared group. So TechSoup is a nonprofit helping other nonprofits with technology. So if you're a nonprofit that wants to get free hardware or help with Microsoft Office donations or Adobe Photoshop licenses, TechSoup is a great place to go for that resource. And they also have community events with the Net Squared group. So SF Tech for Good is one of the longest running Net Squared meetups in the world, of which there are dozens. And people gather together monthly or quarterly to discuss nonprofits, technology, and how to change the world. So that's why we're here. And I joined the Net Squared community about 3 or 4 years ago and running events in the Bay Area. And we are talking tonight with Box.org, CALSO, and Kiva. So for SF Tech for Good, for future events like this one, you can visit our website or meetup page for more info. And feel free to tweet tonight as well. So the format for tonight is about an hour of formal talking and about an hour of informal chatting. We'll start with introductions from each of the panelists and move into panel discussion and Q&A, and don't leave before you get to do the pitch session at the very end. So the last bit of tonight will have 15 seconds for you to talk about if your company is hiring, if you need volunteers, or the resources you want to share with everyone. So that'll be at the end of the panel tonight and the networking time. So anyone from PARISOMA want to talk about PARISOMA? Is Renato here? Or maybe I can talk to Charline. Talk about PARISOMA. So, Renato, you want to come up here and talk about PARISOMA for 15 seconds?
How's everyone doing? All right. So this is PARISOMA. We're a co-working space. We house, let's say, from anywhere from 90 to 110 startups. We do have a bunch of accelerators, not a bunch, maybe a couple of accelerators here in the space. One being CALSO. The other one being the refiners. If you guys are free, actually on October 4th, we'll be having a accelerator welcoming party. So please feel free to join. Other than that, losing my breath. I'll go ahead and pass this over to Katharine, and we'll get this whole thing started.
Thanks for hosting again. So with that, I'll start with a short introduction of CALSO from Charline. Yeah, you can give the 5-minute long speech version, yeah.
Hello, it's working. Hi everyone, so I'm Charline and I'm working at CALSO. I'm the head of business development. I was working before joining CALSO at the beginning of this year. In January, I was working for our mother organization back in Paris, so my apologies for my French accent. I hope it will not be a problem. So CALSO is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is based here in San Francisco. Actually, we are hosted here in PARISOMA, so that's why I was saying that it's a great place, because I know it quite well now. We have activities both in California and also in Austin, Texas. Our general mission is to empower each individual to reach their full potential. We are part of a global consortium, as I was saying earlier, which is based in Paris. It's called INCO. And the global mission, again, of this consortium is to promote a more inclusive and more diverse economy. So here in the US, we leverage tech innovation through mainly 2 activities in 2 ways. The first one, the one that Renato was just mentioning, is by developing incubation programs to support tech for good entrepreneurs. So we have actually 1 program here. And our second activities is to train underserved communities to the job of tomorrow, so to train them in the tech industry. So maybe to go further in details within our activities, so regarding our incubation activities. We manage today a global network of more than 20 different incubation programs around the world, including our 2 incubation programs here in the US, but in many different other countries. We support more than 500 startups through this network of incubation programs. And as I was saying earlier, we specifically support tech for good startups. So maybe just to give you an example, I'm not sure if everyone is aware of what we call at least a tech for good startup. It's basically a startup that have a specific social or environmental impact through its business. We supported, for instance, a very great project and startup which is called Legrand. That is a startup that developed like an educational robot dedicated for autistic children to help them to communicate and learn new skills. And it also like collects lots of precious data for the family or for the caregivers to better monitor the health situation of the child. So today we also have like a global like online platform to actually connect all of the entrepreneurs that we are supporting around the world, so that they can connect with like-minded entrepreneurs, but also with all the mentors with whom we are working in our different incubation programs, experts, and just help them to develop their businesses and enter new markets and maximize their impact through technology. And so regarding our training activities, so our job and our mission is to help underserved communities to enter the job market, and specifically in tech industry. So we provide free training for underserved communities in different industry. For instance, today we have developed 2 different curriculums. One in coding, so we trained specifically migrants and refugees in northern countries in Europe to become web developers. So we provide these like 3 months training programs to help them acquire the necessary skills to become like web developers. We also have developed actually this same program in Asia, in Hong Kong. And we have developed another program which is called Drones and Good, that was studied here actually in the Bay Area, which again is a free training program for underserved communities to help them to become drone pilots. So we studied here in the US 2 years ago to train specifically veterans to become drone pilots, and this is actually a program that we have replicated a few months ago in Europe and mostly in France. And we have more than 520 trainees today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Charline. Jonny, I'll talk about Kiva next while we get the slide set up.
Yeah, sure. I don't really need the slide. Guys, my name's Jonny Price. I am from the UK originally. For the last 6 years, have been leading the US team at Kiva.org, which is a non-profit a few blocks away in Soma. Kiva is a crowdfunding platform that crowdfunds microloans to small business owners, entrepreneurs, farmers, students all around the world. So you can lend $500 to a farmer in Uganda, and that will be crowdfunded by 20 of us, each lending $25. Or we can lend $10,000 to a Vietnamese restaurant owner in the Tenderloin, and that'll come from 400 of us, each lending $25. And the really cool thing about the Kiva model, unlike most other crowdfunding platforms, is that it's a loan, and so you get the money back, and then you can re-lend it and help someone else, and it keeps recycling over and over again. Do we have any Kiva lenders in the house? Yes! All right, we have a Kiva fellow and some Kiva lenders. Thanks for being part of this movement. We talk about reimagining a finance system based on people. I'll give you 3 ways in how we're using technology to do that. The first is that the loans on Kiva are sourced democratically. So just as Wikipedia democratized the writing of the encyclopedia, it used to be that the encyclopedia editor was like the central gatekeeper in terms of which articles went in the encyclopedia and what spin they had. And now any of us can write an encyclopedia, and we created the biggest encyclopedia in the world, and it's actually pretty accurate because it's continuously being updated, and it's totally free for any of us to use. So that's our vision for finance, is that rather than the Wells Fargo loan officer deciding which entrepreneurs are deemed creditworthy, you get to decide that based on your own trade-offs between risk and the impact that you want to have for entrepreneurs in your community or on the other side of the world. So that's one example of how we're using crowdfunding to democratize the decision-making on which entrepreneurs are deemed creditworthy. The second is that we talk a lot about character over credit. So we want to look at an entrepreneur's character over the strength of their credit score. And we see that there's a real challenge of low-income communities, of entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs in those communities accessing capital. And if they can't access capital to start businesses, then they're not going to be able to start businesses. And if they can't start businesses, then they can't use those businesses to create wealth. And if they can't use businesses to create wealth, then we're going to have this huge wealth inequity persist in this country. The median household wealth of white households is $72,000. Does anyone want to guess what it is for African American households in America? $72,000 median household wealth for white households. $37,000. 1% of venture capital funding goes to African American owned businesses. 2% of SBA loan volume. This is the SBA, the Small Business Administration. This is a government program. 2% of SBA loan volume goes to African American owned businesses. 12% of the population of this country is African American. So if there's no wealth in these communities, and if they can't go to banks or venture capital firms to get capital to start businesses, they're not going to be able to start businesses. And part of the reason why they're getting rejected for every bank loan that they apply to is because they have damaged credit. They have messed up finances because they're low-income communities. So what we're trying to do at Kiva is use technology to look beyond an entrepreneur's credit score and make a loan based on the strength of their character. And I don't have time to go into how we do that, but come talk to me after. It's really cool. And then the third thing is, again, how we're trying to reimagine a finance system based on people is that when we make loans to these entrepreneurs, it's not just about the money. Our loans are 0% interest. There's no fee and no interest. And we're trying to lend to people that every bank in town is turning down. So the money is really cool. But the really exciting thing for me is that we're trying to strengthen these entrepreneurs' social capital. So just as when Andreessen Horowitz invests in a startup, these big VC firms are empowering them not just with money, not just with millions of dollars of venture capital investment, but also legal expertise and recruiting expertise and marketing help. And so our vision is, as well as lending $10,000 to that Vietnamese restaurant down the street from here, we're also connecting her to 400 potential customers, 400 potential LinkedIn connections. You guys who have much stronger networks than she does. And so maybe you can open those networks, make a connection for her. And so we're strengthening these entrepreneurs' social capital as well as expanding their access to financial capital as well, based on Kiva's crowdfunding technology platform.
Wonderful, thanks, Jonny. Bryan, want to share about Box?
Really get the chills hearing about Kiva's run, right? Unbelievable. And to see them move their work from the developing world into our backyards here in the Bay Area and so on is phenomenal. So I really bow to the work begun by Matt and company and carried by Primal and the leadership team. And I'm just learning about your work, so I'm really pleased to hear about it. I did hear about the drone, veteran drone skill set. That was all over the media, so congrats on fostering that. So my name's Bryan Breckenridge. I was somehow lucked into a job at Salesforce 17 years ago when I heard they had a volunteering program, and I was looking for a sales gig, and it worked. And so I joined their institution when it was really just getting going and still offered as a freemium product, and helped shape the work that they did in folding the Salesforce business model into a social impact generator, and was fortunate to carry that after about 10 years there over to LinkedIn and help with LinkedIn for Good work, and so kind of got to live at that intersection of the network, the social network and social impact. And then 3.5 years ago was fortunate to be the founding exec director of Box.org, which is affiliated with the cloud content management company known as Box here in the Bay. And so Box.org is, at a vision level, working to maximize the mutual success of the tech sector and the social impact sector. The problems that Box.org addresses is that tech hasn't done what it can to maximize its impact in the world, and two, nonprofits still lack the capacity that they need to go execute against their mission. So those are the two problems we address. The mission, so sort of the tactical day-to-day for us, is to enable nonprofits to innovate and fulfill their mission. And we do that through 3 pillars at Box.org. One is mobilizing our 1,700 employees in various ways, which I'll talk about tonight, toward that social impact imperative, I would almost call it, under that vision. The second pillar is maximizing the access and the innovation on the Box platform for nonprofits. We move documents around securely, it's what we do. And it's a horizontal technology, so nonprofits can garner some value from it. I've met a few here. Kiva is one, and X Prize Foundation was wandering around, and so on. And 7,000 other nonprofits use the technology. So we donate and discount that. We donate through TechSoup, so hat tip to TechSoup. And then the third pillar is institutionally, what can Box do as a company to move its assets, like its cash, its places, its brand, its influence as a brand towards social impact as well. So I see some scowls, some eyebrow scowls. I don't know if that's concern about the model or whatever. We can talk about it after. I'd love to have you vet me against the thoughts. But that's what we do at Box.org, and I'm Bryan. Can't wait for the rest of tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Bryan. So feel free to
That's
tweet.
my daughter. She's her first panel tonight. I told her this was going to be like Project Runway, and she said, I'm on it. I'm coming.
I think
Great.
if you told her it was going to be Project Runway, that might have been an oversell.
And then I said pizza. Or she called me out on this, Dad, it's not going to be Project Runway, but there's pizza. I'm in. So here she is.
Great. So what does a Tech for Good program look like in the US and globally? Jonny, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, so I think Bryan mentioned this, but Kiva is a really cool example of a brand and a company that kind of started in the developing world, and then over time, as you mentioned, kind of came back to support entrepreneurs here in our own backyard in San Francisco. I think it's ironic that a British guy is leading the US program of Kiva. So I like struggle to say my own backyard, but you know what I mean. Yeah, we made our first loans in Uganda to farmers in Uganda. The lender base was always kind of here in San Francisco, and the company was always based here in San Francisco. And at the time, we had an office in the Mission. Actually, I think initially our office was in like Premel's house, and then the Mission, and now here in Soma.
Because of Kiva, Box.org came to existence. So I'll tell that story in 5 minutes or whenever, but we literally like have a Kiva fellow to thank for what I get to do for a living.
Turner.
Correct.
He was a groomsman in my wedding. So yeah, Kiva, we started making loans in Uganda, and then in 2009, so Kiva was founded in 2005, and we were really catapulted in the early days. We had a tremendous amount of growth. I think it largely came from being on Oprah Winfrey's favorite things, which like, if you're running a startup, you should really get it on Oprah Winfrey's favorite things. It's like the absolute surefire way to succeed. And so then 4 years in, we started to have all these lenders come to us and say, this is great that I can support a small business owner on the other side of the world, but I live in Detroit and there's a lot of kind of boarded up windows here, and can you bring Kiva loans to help entrepreneurs in Detroit? So in 2009, we launched in the US. And initially, another thing I'll say that's different about the Kiva US team that I lead is, one, it's based in the US, but secondly, it's kind of disintermediating the Kiva model. And so the classic Kiva model that most of you guys, if you're Kiva lenders, will probably have used is, we partner with a microfinance institution on the ground in Uganda who act as like an intermediary between Kiva and the entrepreneur. And in our model that we launched in 2011 as a pilot, we cut out the middleman and lend directly to the entrepreneur, which has a lot of challenges associated with us, because now we're kind of playing two functions in the value chain, so it's a lot more work for us. But it also has a lot of opportunities around hopefully passing on cost savings to entrepreneurs in the form of lower interest rates, like more closely connecting the borrowers and lenders. That third example of what I spoke about before, that we imagine strengthening the social capital of these small businesses we're lending to. It's a lot easier to do that when you have this direct model. So yeah, we launched in the US in 2009 with the partner-based model. A couple of years later, we launched this direct model, and it's been growing ever since then. We had Bill Clinton launch Kiva Little Rock at the Clinton Library in 2013, and then he launched Kiva New York in 2015, which was really, really inspiring for us. But that's kind of like, I guess, the journey of Kiva, both starting internationally and then bringing that model domestically. Probably the last thing I'll say, just kind of what like tech for good means for us. I think partly it's using technology, right? We have like 25 software engineers. We were probably one of the first kind of real exciting fusions of a nonprofit and a tech company, Silicon Valley tech company. And we use this crowdfunding technology. When we launched this direct model in Kenya, which recently, a couple of years ago, we wound down, which was a tough decision. But when we launched the direct model in Kenya, we were using M-Pesa, which is a mobile payments platform, to disperse the loans directly to entrepreneurs. Really, really cool stuff. So we use technology. But I think the other really interesting thing for me is how we use Silicon Valley kind of startup concepts and ways of structuring our organization and kind of commitments to data. So I talk a lot about lean startup methodologies and how we ran our team. When Kiva decided to launch this direct model in 2011, I think we had kind of a clear fork in the road. We could have either done it as like part of the big Kiva and like done it kind of properly got everyone on the same page and kind of maybe how a big company would launch a big initiative. And we did the opposite approach, which was we kind of spun up a separate website with a password protected pilot and just really kind of almost siloed off the team and tried to run really fast and iterate quickly. And that method of spinning up this pilot was really heavily influenced by this Eric Ries Lean Startup School. And so I think as well as like using technology in what we're doing, we're also trying to kind of take all the like best practices and ideas and concepts from Silicon Valley and kind of use them to run a nonprofit.
Great, thanks, Jonny. So on the company side, how do companies best create a positive impact in the community? Bryan, you want to take that one?
For sure. So it varies, right? I think people often in the commercial space don't recognize their own power in the way that social impact can be pursued. So show of hands, who in the room is in a startup 5 employees or less? And then folks in the room that are 5 and then scaling into round B and C and work for a good sized company with 100 people or a nonprofit, or that's another 10%. And then everybody else is in government or nonprofit or big companies. Just came down the street for that. It's not even that much. So a lot of people are just looking for work as well in the room. It's the general sentiment that I'm feeling from the room. Not that you look desperate at all for a job, at all. Just saying nobody's raising their hands. But I'm trying to get a sense for, the point that I was going to make is that companies often, if they're one person with a great concept, like this great guy I met that's starting his business, that is a mechanical engineer, that's a bike that folds up, and one bike is electric, or one wheel is electric, and one is pedal power, and then the software that regulate the two. So he's working on that. So he may not know that just his intellectual capital represents a really strong, or his engineering background, a really strong mechanism by which nonprofits in the area could build capacity if he applied himself to organizations that need what he has. All the way up through the Salesforces of the world, who have tens of thousands of employees, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars to start to grant, right? Thousands of employees that can apply their intellectual capital, a network, a community, a huge voice and influence, facilities everywhere that can be borrowed by nonprofits and so on. So just know that I think for a tech company to have its social impact and footprint, and I help Box like experience and find its own power, like literally every day. It's like, we don't have a lot of people on those desks on the 5th floor. Oh wait, Build needs a new headquarter because they're between headquarters. Maybe we can put 11 of their people on that floor for a few months. The answer is yes. Because again, it's like an unused resource that they weren't really aware represented phenomenal capacity lift for an organization doing amazing stuff. In the case of Build, they're doing youth entrepreneurship and so on. So what I would say is there's a lot of assets that every organization, one person or 100,000 or 1 million employees, can execute. It just really has to then be thought about and then and harnessed and passed through. And I'll speak to other stuff, but I think that's a quick answer for that question for now.
Thanks. So for CALSO, how do you see tech company volunteers or employees or an ordinary engineer contributing to nonprofits?
Well, actually, we work a lot with a lot of different tech companies. We actually would not be here if tech companies wouldn't help us. This is really precious for us, all the help and support that they can provide to us. They actually provide many different resources and they help us in many different ways. Volunteering is one indeed. Well, first of all, of course, they support us through grants and fundings. Since we are a nonprofit organization, all the programs that we provide to our beneficiaries, whether it is like training programs or incubation programs, our programs are free for beneficiaries. So it is really important for us to be able to raise funds toward these tech companies. And of course, they also help us a lot with equipment. So specifically for our training programs, for instance, you were talking about this Drones and Good program. TGI provided us with different drones, which again help us to like lower the cost to make sure that our program are not like too expensive. We don't have a big budget to raise to develop this training. Microsoft also provided us with laptops, which enabled us to provide like trainings and make sure that our trainees are working in like a good environment and having the whole like tool to during the training. So yeah, equipment is very important also for us. But of course, volunteering, I would say that is the most important thing that tech companies can provide us. For our incubation program, for instance, our like tech employees in the companies that are partnering with us are very helpful to help our social for good startups to overcome their tech challenges and help them to make sure that their business grow. And so this support is really important. And for instance, this is a kind of partnership that we have built in Austin in Texas. Our incubation program there support tech for good entrepreneurs, and 3M employees are mentors for these startups. So like they meet every month to again like to help them to overcome any tech difficulties or challenges that they may have. But it's also very important for our training programs. So again, volunteering by tech companies in our training programs is really important. They help us, for instance, to design our training programs and all the like training materials because they have again the expertise. So it's again really important for our training activities. For instance, we are developing a new training programs in 3D printing, and we're working with a mechanist, which is like an expert in this area. But also, I would say that as a non-profit organization, tech companies volunteer a lot for us. We have worked, for instance, with Google to help us to build a website or to improve our SEO. Since we don't have like specific experts, tech experts in our organization, it's always helpful to have Google employees to help us with these kind of tech issues.
I was gonna just take the company side of that quickly, just because it's something we hear a lot from the nonprofits that we work with. And then for those that are in the room that need to like take some wisdom back to their company on how their company can mobilize the volunteering side, is that a reasonable response? Does that help anyone in the room? It does? Okay. So at Vox.org, we organize the employee engagement in 3 layers. The first layer is to respond to our staff in the areas that they're passionate, and that we refer to as a Good Boxer program. So the Good Boxer cares about, let's say, the drones piece, or cares about writing websites, or cares about whatever they care about. And so we do our best to play matchmaker between an organization using a cool online platform and a boxer. The second tier, though, is like good teams, which is really more or less a department model. And so that isn't just like scopes and partnerships that just like flap all over the place, half alive and half dying. We do what we can to enlist some structure in what we call the Good Pledge program. So we ask a department, or we ask a group or a team or an employee resource group in the company to structure what over the course of the year may actually be a reasonably suitable scope to address a problem with a specific nonprofit partner or partners. Optimally, it's one local and one global partner from the nonprofit space. But again, this team then mobilizes its assets and skills. It may do some fundraising, it may do some general volunteering, it may do some skilled volunteering, it may mobilize their network against a campaign, whatever it is. But nonetheless, it's a group organizing concept. I think Full Circle Fund does kind of a robust version of that here in the city. We do like a light version of that, or a light version of a Clinton Global Initiative commitment to action, if you will, but for a department to look out over a longer period of time. And then last is Box Good Local. So that's our local offices. So like Austin has 200 employees, so maybe they'll clean a park or do something more general volunteering oriented, but at minimum they're addressing a specific problem in the Austin community. Or maybe we'll have 100 boxers in our San Francisco office work with Project Homeless Connect for the day, but we'll work really hard in that Box Good Local program to have 3 components associated with every bit of that work, including a committee, and that is the education component of like, what is the homeless challenge in San Francisco? Educate the office on that, then go activate against that, and maybe that's a day of volunteering with Project Homeless Connect, which is pretty turnkey for those that have ever mobilized a group to go do that. It's amazing, it's a great gateway drug for employees in the commercial world. And then third is, how do they communicate what happened? Because that's where you get a little bit of the brand halo, that's where they start to tell peers, the FOMO kicks in, their colleagues want to go do it the next time, on and on and on. So again, educate, activate, communicate, and the 3 tiers, I'm all about frameworks lately, is good boxer, that's individual matchmaking, right? Then good teams or departments with a structure like a CGI commit and some good recognition along the path and some good support and some good matchmaking, some seed funding from box.org, et cetera, and then Box Good Local, which sometimes takes the form of general volunteering, but it's that good group thing, everybody feels great, they go drink beer after, whatever. So that's an interesting way, I think, of organizing employee engagement. And at Box, I've finally gotten a chance to run that. I didn't get to do that at LinkedIn or Salesforce, I got to influence it. But I think that for us is optimizing not only the number of people that come into this work and actually go serve, but it also, it brings a lot more to the nonprofit that's enlisted, because if my developers are going to go help Kiva solve a development problem, you better believe we're going to create a scope for how we do that. We're not just going to let them go in and wander around, because you've got a completely professional environment. It's a very different than go clean the park volunteering day, right? But if the Box development team decided they wanted to make a good pledge against microlending or the disintermediation back in the States, you can bet we'd sit down with your partnerships team at Kiva and figure out, okay, we're going to bring like $1 million worth of developers to this over the course of the year. Let's do it right and be sure we don't get in your way.
Did anyone else say that's like a commitment?
Does that make sense?
Taking that to the bank, Bryan.
Could be, could be. So anyway, those are some quick thoughts on the corporate side of what I think is developing here, which is like kick-ass organizations and then like a person like me who gets paid to mobilize our employees to go do what they're talking about.
And now I will talk about the nonprofit side, because I have, we've had some awesome like volunteering work done for us, and we've also had some like bad volunteering work done for us. And I do think it's really important to just kind of, if you are like working in the corporation and trying to like set this stuff up for a nonprofit, like be really thoughtful, because you can just like do like either like no good, or sometimes it's like I've had like a whole day wasted, right? Where like with the best of intentions, like people from an outside corporation have come in, and like if any of you guys have done like consulting, it's like kind of hard to come into my business, which I know really well, and like give me insights that are going to help me in a day. But yeah, I get that like often. So you do have to be careful. One specific idea that I will give to like any people working in corporations, I don't know if you guys do this at Box, but training. Like, there's one guy on my team who's like doing all the marketing. So he's running Facebook ads, he's running Google ads, he's running direct mail campaigns, he's trying to get content marketing going, he's trying to get email nurturing going, he's trying to do SEO, like, and then if you go to like a Box or a Salesforce or a LinkedIn, you have like teams of people just doing SEO. And if someone from that team came to train this guy on my team, who's like SEO is like a tiny fraction of his super like resource constrained week, then in like half a day, you could just like rock his world and give him some really awesome like tangible insights, and probably don't need to spend that much time putting together a training deck. And I think one of the challenges of working in the nonprofit sector is a real lack of personal and professional development. So now you're kind of solving that challenge, as well as kind of up-leveling us on the business side. So do you consider like training as a great way that you could take like an expert from your company and like really have them add a lot of value to a nonprofit, even in just a few hours?
Great, thanks, Jonny. Let's hear from the audience. So if anyone has questions you want to ask the panel, I'll come pass around the mic. You can just raise your hand and I'll come over.
Thank you. Should I stand up? Okay. Hi, thank you both so much. I actually have a question on both the corporate and nonprofit side, so it kind of goes across both. How do you narrow down which challenges you want to tackle when it comes to your program and the impact you're making, and then how do you measure that impact? And I ask on the nonprofit side because you can go to a corporate with so many different things. How do you prioritize? And then on the corporate side, how do you assess what you're going after? And then after the fact, what do you think is your bottom line for impact?
Yeah, I can talk to it from the nonprofit side. I mean, personally, I wouldn't worry too much about impact assessment. I was having a really interesting conversation with Yuval earlier about impact assessment, and I was kind of making the case for more venture philanthropy. Venture capital, my analogy was like when VC firms invested in Twitter, they don't need to see profitability, right? They're taking a big bet on an unproven model in the hope of seeing a hockey stick, and then their VC investment pays off big time. And I would think there's an opportunity for more venture philanthropy, especially here in Silicon Valley, like tech-focused nonprofits. Don't need to see the impact assessment. Like, I don't have data. We've been around for 6 years lending in the US, and the sample size is really small. I don't have robust data that says we're creating so many jobs with every loan that we make. But like, I'm really excited about the growth that we're seeing, and I think there's a lot of potential, and if we got some like investment, then maybe and the bet might not pay off in the same way that the VC firms bet on Twitter might not pay off, but like, that's kind of the venture capital model, and I think there's an opportunity to take that to philanthropy. So far, this is not answering your question at all. But where I was going was you asked about kind of impact assessment, and my answer would be like, if Bryan was to bring a box team and like say how much value, and this might not be a good answer for you, but I wouldn't, I mean, I don't want to spend my time trying to quantify the value that like that team has brought to my team. It's like very vague. It's like could come in a bunch of different ways. It's kind of difficult to say. So maybe I just like let's make a video, or let's take some photos and write up a story that's like going to inspire the box team that came. And
it's fascinating you say it. It really is, because and I know Kiva is hell bent to be data driven and analysis driven, and to hear you say that, frankly, is freeing. It's relieving to me, who realizes that I'm like nonprofit outcome shallow in a way, because I can't tell you exactly like how many more mouths were filled and kids educated because of the mobilization of better content management.
That's okay, man. I'm freeing you.
And it's okay, right? Like, I feel like, this is good. I feel levity from this, but in the end, I know because I, as a donor for 100 years in nonprofits, for nonprofits, that I hold them to a pretty strict standard before we cut checks as a family. And so what's interesting is Mark Benioff was a huge fan of just like making the world better. So we knew from the start that there was going to be cash flowing into that. We knew we would go motivate the employees and get them mobilized, and we'd figure it out. And the hours and the dollars and the outcomes, which they're now still really just kind of coming around to, would eventually need to be fleshed out. But I think if you start by over-indexing on the need for the youth in college and the true social impact or outcome, you can lose all the mess-up stuff that you need to do in the beginning to arrive then at where you really are going with that. And I say that because with Box.org, it was a shoestring budget. It was my income. And that's about it when we started it 3.5 years ago. There wasn't a committed donor advised fund. There wasn't a strict adherence to needing to create 1,100 jobs and make Tahoe blue and all this other stuff. Like, it wasn't, like, the social outcome of that was not articulated first. It was, come in here, get really busy, find out what our 1,000 people at the time or 800 people at the time care about, mobilize them as you can, be scrappy like any startup or entrepreneur would need to be, and lo and behold, nonprofits started adopting the technology, and lo and behold, we, instead of doing 10 or 15 events a quarter, we're doing, call it many dozens of events with employees per quarter. And then we realized we started to see some trending areas where the innovation in the technology itself was influencing fundraising, so we decided we could start thinking about how much doing better content management equals better fundraising, or better content management plus all this other capacity building volunteering leads to mission outcomes. But again, we're still like reading tea leaves and a bit of Braille and a little bit of tea leaves and a little bit of hope and wish and surveying here and there and survey monkey and ... But I just think that in that same breath, now that I need to start playing a little bit more in the grown-up game of having a donor-advised fund and starting to move major gifts in places, or at least think about where those dollars are going and create those letters of understanding with organizations. Again, as you start to go from mid to late teenage years or young adult years as a social impact program in a corporation, you do have to start mapping that in. But again, I think if you get too stuck on it, then you forget all this fun, messy stuff that leads to all these incredible energy and this incredible funding.
I'll just say three things, because I totally agree with everything you said. The first thing is, like, just to back you up on, it's about scale, right? Like, at some point, Twitter's got to become profitable. At some point, like, once we've been around for decades and we've made like tens and hundreds of thousands of loans, then we should come to the outcome evaluation. Like, it's got to come at some point. Just saying, like, not in the early years. The second thing is, yeah, you're right. Like, Kiva's really data-driven. I'm an ex-consultant. I love data and analysis. I'm not saying don't have numbers. I'm just saying it's not job creation and it's not percentage increase in borrower household income. It's like the number of loans we're making or the dollars of loans we're making.
And for me, the number of nonprofits using Box, the percentage of our employee base engaged.
Yeah.
Right. So we go from 500 nonprofits on Box to 7,000. We go from 2% of Boxers engaged to 32% of Boxers engaged in giving and volunteering past these 3 years. But the next hope would then be of those 7,000 nonprofits in the areas where we decide to go deeper, which today, maybe the other part of your question is, what topic area as a commercial interest do you even start to think about moving into? Because it's fucking unlimited on what you could do. Sorry, Maya.
So like kind of measure outputs, not outcomes, I think is the technical terminology. Last thing, just to go back to your original question, we kind of like went off on a crazy tangent in response to your very innocent question. But I would say that one metric that I would measure and have every for-profit that comes in and volunteers time for Kiva, net promoter score of the people at the nonprofit that just kind of benefited, hopefully, from your thing. And like, if the net promoter score is really low, then I would really think about like the volunteer program, and hopefully it's super high. And that, I think, is a great data point. And if you can track that over time, the volunteer projects you're doing, then like over time because what gets measured gets managed, right? Over time, you'll focus on moving that NPS up by like kind of tailoring your volunteering projects to what the nonprofit needs.
Yeah, in terms of topic area, because you do seem to be nodding as being interesting, and I think that is, if you're sitting there as a company of 5 or a company of 5,000, where do you go get busy? And I think for Box, as a culture, it's happened in several ways, some engineered and some organic, and that is a survey to employees, very explicitly, what do you care about? Where does your donations go? We're a 20X culture, so there's a lot of young people who are not yet in their philanthropic legacy, so you got to kind of chase where their passions are with surveys. 2, you put an employee giving platform that's mostly reactive, that you promote some, and you see where they start to send their $20 and $30 and $40 gifts. In our case, we use Bright Funds and love it. Ty Walrod's got a great company there. So we look at where the money's going through that platform, right? And then we determine where's our customers, because that's the most important thing, is to come back. Our core competency is cloud content management. Your core competency may be who knows what else, consulting or a widget or a product or whatever. So we have to realize that it's important for me to have an orbit around the nonprofits who are addicted to my technology, because they want to do even more with it than maybe they have. And so we want to be close to that. And last, the other vector on this, whatever this is, triple helix or quadruple helix or whatever's happening, is sentiment of your influencers in your business. So of course you can ask your customers eventually. Like, I've never even asked the tens of millions of people who use Box for free what they care about socially. But I plan to, and we plan to drive them toward a kick-ass appeal and raise a ton of money and a ton of awareness for some people, because they're using my shit for free right now, right? So at least ask them if they're using Box for free, what they care about, and then help them mobilize against it. But what I was getting to is the people that make the decisions in the company and the influence in the company, it's important to note what they care about. Not to fall in the trap of the 1980s and 70s and 90s, like husband of or wife of founder syndrome, as we love the kids in Africa and away they go, but it doesn't really mean anything for what they do or what their people care about or what their product is attracting and so on. So those are the 4 or 5 things that we harvest our focus areas from, and they evolve, because I don't think you want to get too formulate too fast. Sorry, Catherine.
It's okay. We got time for 1 or 2 more questions.
This is a question to Jonny's point around poor personal and professional development in the nonprofit space, but for any of you to answer. So are there any trends you're seeing in remedying this issue, whether it's hybridized companies that kind of fuse the Silicon Valley nonprofit space ethos or almost incubated in-house programs like Box.org? Like, are you seeing efforts to incentivize college grads? I just graduated recently myself, away from consulting, Wall Street or even tech.
I mean, I feel like number one, you've got nonprofit who's hamstrung because they can't go into double digits on their operating spend, right? They can't have decent IT because then they tip above 2% of income on IT, or they can't send their leadership off to leadership retreats because that, again, starts to carve money out of the quote program focus, right? But I'm crazy about fighting that. So I think you're starting to see a trend. You're seeing funders care more about enabling technology and enabling employee competency and leadership capability and so on. You're seeing that more and more. I mean, you're seeing nonprofit leadership get their ass fired as well for sending their people to programs in fancy hotels to become better professionals, sadly. I think you're starting to see funders care about that. So I think there's an interesting trend, and I don't have to list off who those funders are. But the venture funders who do more than cut a check and are starting to care about wraparound services are starting to care about that stuff more and more. Now, as for college grads coming to us instead of finance and consulting, I generally think that companies that authentically do care about the world and start to focus part of their business plan and strategy to include social impact are preferred over companies that don't. Maybe that's a blanket statement that everybody knows, but if you're trying to justify budget for a program like mine, find the research and be sure to pass it up the chain, because it's real. It's totally real. We have a program at Box called Boxer Referral Bonus for Good. It's my last nugget. Maybe I'll have others. But the Boxer Referral Bonus for Good program says, we got this huge chunk of budget that we give to employees when they refer their smart colleagues to come work at the company. Well, we were working really hard to get to cash flow positive, as we did here recently, so we had to make some creative constriction in budgets here and there. And we said, what about every time an employee refers a colleague to come work at Box, we give them $500 to give back to the charity of their choice, instead of having a $1,200 or $1,500 cash-only bonus. Now, I think in any tech company, you have to keep a little bit of bling-bling pride going, so we have a raffle for a big lavish vacation every quarter as well. That when you refer a colleague, you can still win that big vacation to Hawaii for 15 grand or whatever it is. And every employee you refer, you get another name in the hat to get a higher chance to win. But the point is, in March of last year, when we started Boxer Referral Bonus for Good, we didn't have any charitable giving per se. The people and recruiting team at Box decided they wanted to start giving back. So we attached it to a necessary business metric, which was recruiting great people and growing the team. Now that's been 97 employee referrals, that's $48,000 that's made its way out to nonprofits since last March, because we were smart to bake a social impact strategy into our recruiting bonus structure. And guess what? Those bonuses were $500 instead of $1,200 or $1,500 for a certain type of employee. So we literally were saving some money on the balance sheet that Wall Street needed us to accomplish, but created a charitable giving component that frankly has become cultural legend, and people talk about it. And they're like, oh yeah, I love working here. Thanks a lot. By the way, who'd you give your money to? Oh, I gave the $500 to the ASPCA of SF. Oh, kick-ass, tell me about that. Next thing you know, it's a volunteering thing for their team. I mean, it's just, you get the point, right? You create a culture that actually gives a shit, and you might even save money doing it and totally hockey stick the amount of charitable contributions you're making back into the community. And last, it's employee driven, so the employee can send the money where they want the $500 to go, right? And so I just think that's one thing that any company can do, because most companies, once they get to whatever it is, 10 people or whatever, start to incentivize their colleagues to refer their friends to come work with them, and do that with cash. But we do that with cash and philanthropy and raffles. Rambling, I'm
Last
tired.
question?
I would love to answer as well, actually. This is probably the first time I've disagreed with Bryan on this panel, but I actually feel a little bit more pessimistic on that front. I don't know if you've seen the Dan Pallotta TED Talk, but you guys should definitely go and watch it. And he's, I think, pretty pessimistic, and it's this TED Talk, and he had this nonprofit, and he was phenomenally successful in marketing it and raising a lot of money, but then got into a lot of trouble and was heavily criticized because he was like raising money to kind of, and spending money on like fundraising and marketing rather than like programmatic delivery.
And the numbers were he was raising hundreds of millions of dollars on like a 20% multiple instead of 1 million on 8% or 2% or whatever, right? So it's an interesting.
So it was like he was kind of putting more aggregate money into it, but he was being really criticized for it. And another thing that he talks about in that TED talk is just salary gap. And I think that's really real. And I think the challenge is that when you come out of college, like the pay gap between the Kiva starting salary and the Google starting salary is like 20 grand, like 40%. It's like small. But like when you are the CEO of Kiva, the pay gap is like millions of dollars and like many hundreds of percent. So basically, the more senior you go in the nonprofit sector, the bigger the financial sacrifice that you're making to stay in the nonprofit sector. And I think that is a deep, paradigmatic like challenge, which is just going to keep meaning that the best and the brightest people go into banking and consulting and tech rather than work for nonprofits. And I think that's a real shame. And there's not really that much that I see that kind of can be done about it, certainly in the short term. I hope in the long term that foundations and funders can kind of start to think more about that challenge. But the other part of it is, to your point, like there's not the same professional development in the nonprofit sector. And so partly like the more senior you go, like the harder it is to retain the very best talent. And partly the more senior you go, like the bigger the gulf in like professional development in you versus the private sector. So then you get really bad people running nonprofits. Like I'm a great example of that.
Too funny.
Great.
But I do think with the tech-centered nonprofit scene, like there may be a bridge in that, right? Like with your crew and with the fast forward cohorts and so on that are kind of danced in front of they're danced in front of enough deep pockets that eventually they realize that model doesn't scale like the traditional operating nonprofit model. And the tech-centered models are starting to draft a little more on some of those more current acceleration strategies.
I'm more optimistic about kind of tech companies like doing more like Box is doing, I'm more optimistic on that side. And the whole Anil Dash movement, like how can we take Twitter and Facebook and like get them to kind of be more focused on social impact just in running the companies. That I'm pretty optimistic about, kind of getting nonprofits and paying high salaries, giving better resources.
Yeah, it's still making a return on investment more than just cash in the end. It's having the social impact factor into that in some manner, which again it's moving huge boulders up hills, and that's for long nights of wine drinking and so on to figure that piece out. We can't figure that out here, but it's true. I think though that the perception that you'll make no money working in nonprofit as a blanket statement is one of the most debilitating things that happens in nonprofit employment. And to shed a little light, because I'm just insistent on blowing some sunshine up everybody's ass on all these topics, it's just how I am. But I worked at LinkedIn for those years, so we actually got to see how many people jumped over the wall from the commercial sector into the nonprofit sector. And that was our mission. Like Meg Garlinghouse and I would sit together and we'd say, if we can do anything with LinkedIn for good, let's lower the barrier between the sectors. And granted, compensation is a big one, and you shouldn't have to wait until you have a huge nest egg to go work in nonprofit, right? But I do think that wall is falling, because I feel like just generally saying you'll never make any money in nonprofit and you're for sure gonna make a lot of money in corporate I'm too tired to remember the right words, but it's kind of say again? Yeah, it's a bit of a false dichotomy in that way, and I think that hurts it, because then suddenly talent doesn't even go interview for things that they could, and they realize maybe taking that 25% cut would actually be okay, but they're not even going to go to that interview and bring their massive skill set network to the nonprofit if they're a part of the thought process. You could never make a living wage at nonprofit, let alone kind of blow it out.
Thank you. All right, last question.
Wow, here she goes. Watch out.
This is not as bad as you think it is, Dad. Okay, so what makes your organizations compare and contrast, and how do they work together for the better of others?
I think we've talked a little bit about that so far, that our organizations are kind of similar, that we're all trying to make the world better, and we're different because legal structure is one thing, but I'm not really, I don't know, maybe end of the day, it's an important thing for us to continue to think about, maybe over the wine version of tonight, but what does drive our businesses? What does drive our organizations? Something to be said for that.
What I agree, and actually we say that we want to promote like the next generation of entrepreneurs. So maybe you will be one of these next generation of entrepreneurs.
I would say I think there's a place for for-profits in our economy, like Box, and I hope that more and more for-profit companies start to think about social impact more broadly and how they can give back through the model that your dad has been talking about tonight. And I also think there's a place for non-profit models, and I think like the market mechanism doesn't always work. And you know, if you look at the finance sector where I work in, our finance sector is not working right now. It's absolutely not working. It's leading to really bad outcomes in society. Where like in America, the bottom 10% of households have less wealth now than they did 30 years ago. And it's really, really expensive from a financial services point of view to be poor. Like if you're poor, you pay my nanny, I hope she's not watching on Facebook Live, I doubt it. But my nanny took out a $7,000 loan and she was paying 10% interest per month, which like if you compound that, I don't know what it works out at, but it's not a fun APR. And for the first year, she was really encouraged just to pay the interest payments. So she paid $700 per month for 12 months. That's $8,400. And by the end of her first year, she'd paid back $8,400 on a $7,000 loan and still owed $7,000. And that is, like, our finance system is so messed up, and the market mechanism has, like, delivered us the finance system that we have. And I think, so point is, like, there's a lot of areas in which I don't think the for-profit sector works, and so you need non-profits saying, we are willing to try and serve these people, that it's not economically viable for a for-profit company to do. And so I think you have to have, and so...
I think that the lessons learned can go two ways, right? As much as you want my SEO person to come in and kind of like, wax, brilliantly on what is needed for SEO optimization, I think that you're starting to see some really interesting brokers between the sectors that let practices flow two ways, and suddenly the commercial entities realize there's so much more to gain, and suddenly people are equal-sided instead of the sighted bleeding the blind, right, and the hand down to the nonprofit that needs help from the corporate thing. I commit to seeing more and more of that, and I think, frankly, that nonprofits over time will be able to monetize that knowledge on their skills and expertise on their way back to commercial sector. I mean, look at NASA and so on, and other public works projects or nonprofit projects that have now led to these phenomenal commercial enterprises and the privatization of space and so on. And so, again, I think there's some NGO and nonprofit practices that the for-profit has a lot to learn from, and if we package it right as a nonprofit sector coming back to commercial, there may be a lot of capacity building gold in those packages. Anyway.
Awesome.
Great question.
Yeah, great question, Maya. Thank you.
So now we'll move on to the last portion of tonight's organized discussion. So if you want to stand up and share something that you want to have the room know about, either a volunteer opportunity that you want volunteers for, or a job that you're hiring for, an upcoming conference, or anything like that. You want to start with the conference, Bryan?
Yeah, Box Works. It's kind of like Dreamforce, but smaller. And it happens October 10 to 12. Here in Moscone Center, we'll have like 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 people in there. I think DJ is even DJing, like Snoop Dogg is DJing a set the last night, literally. So.com, it's unbelievable. But anyway, that's called Box Works, and nonprofits get full scholarship to the event. I've got 500 nonprofit leaders registered right now, and just go to Box Works in a browser and find the nonprofit application. If you do work at a nonprofit and you want to come network at Box Works for free instead of $1,100. October 10 to 12.
No comment?
Am I allowed to do this too?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course.
Stand up and speak, though.
Okay. Wait, are we starting? Oh, okay. Well, if you want to help me with my homework, I'm good. And I can help present because I'm very comfortable up here, if you ever need that. And I think that's 15 seconds, good up with the timing too. there you go.
Awesome.
So you're probably raising money for the hurricane places, so you can tell people about that later. But anyway.
Okay. Anyone have an ask or offer they want to share? If you can stand up and I'll bring over the mic. Anyone hiring and need volunteers for your nonprofit? You got one over here?
Hi, I'm with the ACM, and we have a data science camp. It's a non-conference. It's essentially free to register. Saturday, October the 14th, down in San Jose, but nowhere there's a train. So we would love to have, we haven't had any social cause speakers. We've got a ton of sort of for-profit stuff. So come and stick it to the for-profit side of the universe. Show them why they're wrong, please. If you're interested in speaking, come and speak to me. SF Bay ACM Data Science Camp, Saturday, October 14th, San Jose.
You need nonprofits speakers at the conference?
Well, we welcome all speakers on, like data science related or visualization related stuff, but this would be awesome to get. So you can tell your for-profit friends too.
Thank you. Anyone else have something you want to share?
Hi, my name is Candice. I am a week and a half into the nonprofit sector, came from corporate, 14 years. I wish I met you earlier because I came from finance and I was looking for something to get into a better social impact.
Come work
but
for Kiva, Candice.
I don't think my ED would like that after a week and a half, but we are always looking for volunteers. I work for Telegraph Hill Neighborhood Center, but like I said, I'm only a week and a half in, so I've been spending time with the kids. We do work with low income, anywhere from K to high school. My preference is really volunteers to help teach them tech because they are low income. Some of them have jobs at 16 trying to help their families stay afloat. So I want to put them in a better position. That's kind of what I'm looking for. Obviously the cash is great too, but I'm looking more for the SEO, the tech, the content, and then also the training. But I'm here, I have a card if you want to come talk to me.
Yeah, just send me an email to bb@box.com and I'll connect you with our SF office
Perfect.
volunteer coordinator and get people out.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. bb@box.com.
All right. Take a couple more pitches.
Hi, my name is Stephanie, and I'm here with Business Models Inc. So we have lots of skills in terms of thinking about your business model. If you want to scheme your social business or scheme how to make your business fit for the future, come talk to me. We would love to chat. Also, if you guys want speakers, we love to be on stage and talk about business models and geek out on all things business. So come talk to me if you're interested in any of that.
Great. Time for about two more.
Hi, I'm Hillary Hogan, and I help nonprofits and growing tech companies find office space. So if anyone has a growing nonprofit and they're looking to grow out of their space, I'm happy to help.
Great.
My name is Lauren. Stephanie gave me an idea, and that is I'd be willing to volunteer for PARISOMA to help analyze startups from their technical aspect, like a legal point of view, but I'm not a lawyer, so I cost a lot less. So I'm a patent engineer, technically involved for startups in Silicon Valley. So I look at your portfolio, like little things like, for example, that you may not know, like if you ever go to a trade show and show your product, you can never patent it. So like those gotchas that, you know, a lawyer will cost a lot of money and I won't, but I'm more than happy to come visit one day and just sit down with people here at PARISOMA.
Wonderful.
Hi, I'm Berenice. We actually all work for Flexport. We do freight forwarding and we're a customs broker as well. And we're right now trying to get more into our volunteering efforts here in the Bay Area, but also across all of our offices. So if you need volunteers, we can help with that, but we also can help in terms of transportation, logistics, supply chain, any of that type of consulting as well. So we have different facets to that. This is part of our flexport.org side of things. So please let us know if you need anyone.
Great.
So I actually work for Build. Thank you for donating the offices that we use. We're a youth entrepreneurship program, and we always need mentors, predominantly in Oakland right now. We also do mentorship programs on the peninsula and in San Jose. But our students become entrepreneurs in 9th grade and then run a small business 9th and 10th grade, 11th and 12th grade. It moves into college access, and so they need adults once a week that show up to care about them and their lives, and they're real cute. So build.org.
Great
Thanks.
organization.
Okay, last one.
Hi, my name is Michelle, and I work for a social good app company that is connecting people having meaningful conversations about the things that matter to them. So my sister has MS. If I want to talk to somebody else who has a family member that has MS and I want it to be anonymous, one-on-one and private, that's what we do with our app. And we're actually looking for a web developer to help us with building out our most recent iteration of our website. So if you know anyone or are anyone that could do that, we'd love to chat with you.
Great. Let's get another round of applause for PARISOMA for hosting. And for our panelists. This concludes tonight's event. Hang out, enjoy the drinks, and keep networking. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.